Good day everyone, Mr. Lochan here. We are at the lab today again and we wanted to discuss and share a little bit on something that I know we've done before, and we want to talk a little bit on something called anemia. I know it's a term that many of us might be familiar with, but if you join me for the next few minutes, I want to help enlighten us and on a very important area. So I have a little diagram here on this board, and I want you to join me for a short while as I go through a few important things. All right. Now, this word anemia, many persons refer to it, and what they really mean. Sometimes they say it's low blood count, but essentially, it's really not just low blood count. Your blood is made up of different cells: red cells, white cells, and platelets. And when someone says or use the word anemia, what they really mean is low hemoglobin. Low hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is the red pigment in our cells that is responsible for gaseous transfer of oxygen and carbon dioxide at the level of cells, tissue, and exchange at the lung. So I just want to go back here to importantly tell you, anemia, sometimes referred commonly by many persons as a low blood count, really means a low hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the red pigment found in our blood, in our red blood cells, and its job is to transfer and transport gases, the likes of which is carbon dioxide and oxygen. But this hemoglobin, and I want to bring you here now, don't judge me by my diagram, but blood is made through a process called hematopoiesis, and it's made in adults, it's made in our bone marrow, in our long bones. So a process called hematopoiesis or blood manufacture occurs in our bone marrow. But the blood that is made are our white blood cells, our red blood cells, and our platelets. The job of our white blood cells is to assist in immunity and protection from foreign invasion. The job of our platelets is to assist in coagulation or clotting to help us prevent or minimize loss of blood in injuries. And of course, your red blood cells, their job, as mentioned just now, is to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide. So these three different cell types are made in our bone marrow, through a process called hematopoiesis. And quite simply, it's a very fantastic thing happening right now in all of our bone marrows. You've got a pluripotent stem cell, or what we like to call a mother cell. That mother cell gives rise, or has the capacity to give rise to different daughter cells. And these daughter cells can give rise to granddaughter cells, and then subsequently, so on and so forth, great granddaughter cells. But here's what happens. When this pluripotent stem cell or this mother cell starts to divide and produce daughter cells, these daughter cells, when they give rise to granddaughter cells, they become more and more specialized. So as they give rise to new cells, they become more and more specialized until way down the road, you've got your white blood cells, which are 5 different types. You've got your red cells, and you've got your platelets. When these are mature, they come out from the bone marrow and enter the circulation in our blood vessels. But that's a simple introduction to hematopoiesis and blood manufacturing. All right. Now, I just want to, the most important thing today is to let you appreciate the fact that our bone marrow is kind of like a factory. It is kind of like a factory, and as most or all factories will require, factories require raw materials. They also require machinery or equipment, stuff to do the job. So let's bring and come across here to another diagram of a simple bone, and we want to just remember that our bone marrow, our bone, can be thought of as a factory. Raw materials are required, and you've also got a machinery or equipment, meaning within that bone marrow you've got things happening to make these different blood cells: white cells, red cells, and platelets. But this thing called anemia, viewers, this thing called anemia, what we call a low hemoglobin, essentially can occur as a result of different things. And the important thing I want to share with you this morning is this point that anemia, which is a low hemoglobin, can occur as a result of different things. To start with, there can be a problem with a lack of raw materials. If the factory is working good, but there isn't or there aren't enough raw materials to do the job, then you're going to have a problem and anemia can result. As a matter of fact, the most common form of anemia worldwide is what is called iron deficiency anemia. That essentially comes from a lack of raw materials. Therein lies the reason why many persons finding out that they may be anemic would essentially use the first option of building back their blood count by stimulating the bone marrow with raw materials, iron supplements, etc. All right, but that's one area in which anemia can occur. Lack of raw materials. Another major problem that can cause anemia is also if the machinery or the equipment or the hematopoietic tissue, the blood building tissue, is imperfect or problematic. This can happen now where there's a manufacturing issue. So the first one with raw materials is really an issue with supply, lack of adequate supply. An example, iron deficiency anemia. But then you can have a problem with the manufacturing or the assembly line within the bone marrow. The assembly line or the factory is not working good regardless of whether there's enough raw materials or not. Some of these now could be inherited disorders. Example, sickle cell. Sickle cell anemia is one type of anemia that is inherited from either parents or one parent. So that's a manufacturing issue. So first you can have a supply issue, which is raw material related, and now you can also have a manufacturing issue where the actual assembly line is not working properly. All right, that's a second cause of anemia. And then also commonly you can have problems or you can have anemia as a result of increased destruction or loss of red blood cells, meaning the raw materials were there, the machinery is working good, but what happens, there could be an increased destruction. Certain types of hemolytic diseases, hemolytic meaning the bursting or destruction of red cells. So you can have anemia being caused by an increased destruction or loss of blood cells. And what can cause loss? Massive hemorrhaging, blunt force trauma injuries, accidents where there's a lot of blood loss. You can have a patient suffering anemia as a result of just blood loss. Females with heavy monthly cycles, persons bleeding through the anal or the GI tract, you can have that. All right, but those all contribute to a low hemoglobin. Coming across here now, with the main take-home point today, viewers, is for us to be aware that not all anemia are the same. Not all anemia are the same. You need to consult your physician regularly. Let him or her partner with you to perform a test called the CBC, or complete blood count, which is an analysis of your white cells, your red cells, and your platelets. And according to normal ranges, your white cells supposed to be a particular value, your red cells supposed to be a particular range, and so also your platelets. When there are problems, illnesses, lack of raw materials, maybe the machinery is not working good, or maybe there's an increased loss or destruction, you're going to have changes in those values. Please know that anemia, or some types of anemia, progress very subtly, and sometimes a patient may not even be too aware and may misinterpret the symptoms of the anemia. So we just wanted to just touch base with you, and the reason why we redid this short session today is because of the high incidence of anemia we are seeing, especially in our female patients. Okay, and we encourage you, try to submit yourselves to your physician's guidance and diagnostic test. And one very important test is called the CBC, or complete blood count. Take care of yourselves, live well, and all the best.